Welcome back to Chapter Chats. In this episode, we are unpacking Chapter 3 of Chuck's 5th edition of ISD from the Ground Up, a no-nonsense approach to instructional design, titled Theory and Models of Instructional Design. This chapter dives into the framework that guides how we create effective learning experiences. From exploring the foundational ADDIE model to understanding why Bloom's taxonomy and Maslow's hierarchy are tools rather than true ISD models, we'll discuss how the three truths about ISD models and how they serve as interconnected systems. Whether you're new to the field or looking to refine your approach, this discussion is going to help you navigate the landscape of instructional design models. So let's dive in. Chuck, the first question is, ISD models serve multiple purposes. Can you share what you see as their three primary purposes and why they function as an interconnected system rather than isolated parts?
Well, ISD models have always been interesting, and students that study these sometimes have very spirited responses and thoughts about these. And what I've found over time is models are just models. Okay, Fabio is a model. Are any of us going to be Fabio? Certainly not with my hair now. Maybe in my 30s I could give it a run, but this whole idea that we have to remember what models really are. And if you're studying this in a course, you're just looking at this and you've got a copy of the book or don't, you have to think about models and put them in the places they really deserve. So the things that I find useful about models, it helps me think about what are the important things that I need to look at as I'm designing learning. And the ADDIE model is the most recognized of all. So you think about analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. And okay, that's ADDIE. And those are all the 5 things that I have to do every time I design a learning experience. And for me, models are a justification. They are a place to start, they're groundwork, or whatever you want to look at it. But you have to think about instructional design in terms of 2 really different areas. So as in most sciences, and I believe instructional design is a science, you have the theoretical and the applied. Models fall into the theoretical ISD framework. That doesn't mean you can't apply them directly in some cases, but it does mean that you have to put them in their place. And their place is to provide a framework for trying to get to what you need to do as a professional in the field. So theoretical ADDIE, applied is, okay, I need to do analysis. I need to design this. Development, I got to put together slide decks or materials or whatever. Implementation, of course, you implement. And you evaluate both the process and the product. And so there, ADDIE really shines. And most of the people that identify with the model, I think it's now up to about 78%, the last poll I saw, identify with ADDIE. Now, certainly there are other models out there, rapid prototyping, SAM, the rest of them. Whatever you choose as your framework is fine. It doesn't really matter, because when you get from the theoretical to the applied, each one of your course design processes is going to be different depending on all the variables. So first and foremost, keep models in their place. They are models.
Okay, question 2, Chuck. Bloom's taxonomy and Maslow's hierarchy are often discussed in educational contexts. Why do you categorize them as tools for learning design rather than ISD models?
Yeah, that's a good question. It comes up a lot, and I've seen this misrepresented. Perhaps it's not meant to be misrepresented, but they aren't ISD models in terms of how do I design learning? How do people learn? How do I evaluate learning? These are subsets that you can plug into different components, whether you use ADDIE or whatever. So let's look at Bloom. What is Bloom telling us? He's telling us that there is a platform of how people learn. You have the basic skills to the hierarchy all the way up to mastery and different levels of mastery. So if you really dig into Bloom and use him to help you with writing objectives or whatever you do, that's a great thing. But you can't just look at Bloom in isolation and say this is how learning takes place. And the same with, Maslow. Very important stuff, and certainly applicable, especially, I think, in analysis. but is it really a learning model? Is this how people learn? And I don't think it is.
All right, the next question, number 3, you mentioned 3 truths about ISD models in this chapter. Could you elaborate on 1 or 2 of these truths and why they are vital for both new and experienced learning designers to understand?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think as you're looking at this whole thing about models and theoretical models and theoretical instructional design and the rest of it, you have to remember that this is just a framework. This is just a place to start. So you can look in other fields and look what theoretical did as termed to practical or applied. And you have to step back a second and say, all right, I need to look at ADDIE. I need to do these 5 things. Usually, I mean, not every time, but usually you have to do those 5 things. But that is not how I'm going to do workflow. If you do ADDIE as ADDIE, it might not work for you. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that this is a very linear way to design learning. And if you applied the model in ways that are directly applicable to how you design learning, then it is very linear and not very forgiving. So I never look at ADDIE as a linear model. I look at ADDIE as these are 5 things I have to do. And as you look at the other things about models too, you got to remember that no 2 learning scenarios are ever the same. You have to think, what is the difference in these and how does this model even impact this, if at all? And are we looking at details that are insignificant to the model, but incredibly powerful in the learning design process? So I think all of these truths are important. You can look through the chapter and see all of the verbiage I put in there about them. But I think the thing to walk away with is they are just models. And if someone tries to tell you that they don't like ADDIE because it's too linear, step back and smile and say, okay, well, it's not meant to be a workflow. It's meant to be a theoretical model. That's what it is.
Another question is, you mentioned the Goldilocks Principle in this chapter. Can you go into that a little bit? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, this is interesting because when you look at models and all the different variations on models, there's this tendency to try to think that you have to fit everything into one model, which absolutely you probably won't be able to do. If you can, give me a call. I'd like to see how you do it. So the more I thought about this, the more I thought, okay, well, what we do is we blend things together. We try to find the best resonance on everything that we design. And if we have to pull a piece from this model or that model as a foundational principle, then that's just fine. So I kind of think about this, is one model too hot and one model too cold? Am I going to sit in the middle somewhere? So I named it Goldilocks. That's probably silly, but it just seemed to me to make sense in terms of the popular view of how we work with these things. And in reality, you pick the best parts of everything and you use them, or at least you should. So when you think about Goldilocks, okay, there's some things that you really don't need, and there's other things that really don't work. And so what I'm going to find is a resonance in the middle when I get to my workflow design. So that's where the principle comes from. And I hope it makes sense to people, but it made sense to me. And instead of trying to shoot for perfection, try to find the best balance of everything.
Final question for you, Chuck. You delve into several ISD models, as we've already established here, such as rapid prototyping, SAM, Kemp, Dick and Carey, and Assure. What distinguishes these models, and how might a designer choose the right one for a specific project?
Yeah, good luck with that. There's some great models out there. Some of them, frankly, don't come from learning design. If you look at rapid prototyping, it's been around a very long time. Certainly, people that do computer programming do different things. They like rapid prototyping. It's kind of evolved into SAM. You can look at it any way you want to. But the notion is you have to pick a framework that best suits what you need to do. And that's why I try to take the focus away from models and more on workflow. Because what I do every day is workflow. I don't do models every day. And if you had to hold me to one, it'd be ADDIE. But I also do rapid prototyping because I've got years and years of experience. And sometimes I could just cut and paste stuff in there and it works just fine because it's already been proven and it works and it's all those things. So as you look through this chapter, think about what is your relationship to this whole concept of models? How important are they to you? And one thing that I've found is when I'm working with people that are not instructional designers. So I'm working with managers, I'm working with boards, funders, however you want to look at it, clients. What I tend to do is fall back on ADDIE and say, here's the framework from which we work. Here's a theoretical basis and foundation for what we do as instructional designers. And I don't try to confuse them with the facts. That, okay, well, workflow a little bit different. I'm not going to spend 3 hours with a board talking about workflow because they don't care. They just want to have some confidence that you know what you're doing and what's it based on. And models will give you that. And which one, to me, pick one that works for you.
Thanks, Chuck, for those insights. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this session of Chapter Chats with Dr. Chuck Hodell.